How's it going, everybody? I am Pastor Peter Adams, and I am here to continue our series for the youth of the chapel, going through the cover to cover of the Bible, talking about the Jesus story from the beginning in Genesis all the way to the end in Revelation, that it's all about Jesus. Today, I get a chance to pour into a little bit about the battles that are taking place in the Old Testament. When I was a kid, I was not super outgoing. I was very shy. I was very introverted. I liked to spend time in my basement. Was not pulled out of my shell until one of my few friends was very involved in drama and plays. And he was like, Peter, come on. You got to come out and you got to try this out. You got to help us out. We are shorthanded. You don't have to do anything. You can stay in the back. You can do props, whatever. We just need you to come. I was suckered into doing this. And sure enough, I end up getting a minuscule part in my first play, which was Arsenic and Old Lace. And if you don't know that play, I got to play Special Agent Number 1. Yeah, that's a huge part. Huge part. No, not at all. What ended up happening was I would come on stage, and my next door neighbor was one of the main characters, and she would go crazy on stage, and Special Agent Number 1 and 2, yeah, it wasn't even special because I wasn't, that way. I open the door, and I walk in, and I stand there, and I look super, and then Special Agent 2, I didn't even have a line. Special Agent 2 goes, "You're coming with us." And then we walk in, we take my neighbor, and we pull her off stage. And so I was like, I can handle this. So we do it. First couple shows goes great, no problem. And then all of a sudden, the third show comes around, one of the final nights that we're doing this, and my neighbor is a little extra boisterous. I come on stage, Special Agent Number 2 says, "Lady, you're coming with us." And I go over to grab my neighbor. And I grab her by the shoulders, and I start to pull her back. And then she looks me straight in the eye, and she gives me this, and then she takes off. Like, I was not a big, strong person. She took off on me and starts running around stage. And I'm looking around like, this is not normal. This is not what's supposed to happen. I'm freaking out. And so I do the only thing that I can do. And I chase her around the stage. I'm like, whoa. And I'm all over the place, right? And she's going behind scenes and all this. And I finally get her. She stops in the middle of the stage. And I tackle her. And I fall to the ground. And we're rolling around on the stage. And she ends up on top of me. And she slams me on the ground. And then she just starts kissing all over my face with this bright red theater style makeup, and it was just all over you couldn't tell where the makeup stopped and my face began because I was so embarrassed. She finally, when she's done, she gets off of me and she moves out to the side, and I just sit up and I look out at the audience and I don't say a word, but everyone just starts cracking up and clapping. And in that moment, Special Agent Number 1 was a star, right? And that's how the Bible story starts to work as we get into the story of Joshua. The secondary characters start to take the stage, and they get their moments of spotlights. They have a huge impact on the entire region, the entire story, and ultimately the entire world. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to skip the fact that Israel made a promise to follow God. They immediately messed up, right? And they didn't trust him. They didn't enter the promised land. They didn't do what they were told. And so for 40 years, they're wandering around like crazy people in this region down here, right? This says to Egypt. They're coming from Egypt. They come up here and they go, not going in. And then they get to wander around for 40 years. An entire nation, right? We're moving from Moses, who's a powerhouse, right? He's talking to God. He's doing all these miracles. He's splitting Red Seas. He's turning rods into snakes. He's doing all these things. We're going from Moses to a new generation. And who steps into the spotlight? Who does God choose to step into the spotlight? The intern, right? The intern. We meet the first time we meet him, he's just a boy. He's a gopher. He's just a nobody. He's Special Agent Number 1 in the story. But now that Moses has died, Joshua steps up. 40 years later, he's a man. And we get to see this in Joshua chapter 1, 1 through 9. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn there with me. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, then, you and all these people get ready to cross into the Jordan River, right? This is the Jordan River. We're going to cross into the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert, right, to Lebanon, and from the great river to the Euphrates, like all this area, right, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Verse 6, be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to the ancestors to give them. Number 7, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave to you. Do not turn from it to the left or the right, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Do you see a common theme in these verses here? Right? Be strong and courageous. Why would God have to repeat himself 3 times to Joshua? Why would he have to say, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid. Maybe because that's how Joshua felt in that moment. Was afraid, weak, and not courageous. He was a secondary character thrust into the limelight. And all of a sudden, the world may have felt like this was something that was being done to him instead of something that he was naturally doing. He needed to be strong and courageous, right? And he's a secondary character from the previous story, now thrust into the new story. Much like Steve Rogers, right? The skinny little kid from Captain America, that when he gets shot with a super soldier serum, just like gets all beefy, right? And becomes like Chris Evans-esque, you know? We get to see this transformation happen to Joshua from Steve Rogers to Captain America, right? He becomes a super soldier. We never know when that moment is going to happen for us. But God says that if we have Jesus by our side, like he promises Joshua, that we don't have to be scared. That we are called to be strong and courageous in those moments. That we are called to step up into those moments when the light is shining bright on us and we have no idea what to do. God is already doing something awesome. He's not Moses. Joshua doesn't try to be Moses. He's a super soldier through the boost of a Holy Spirit calling. This is just one of the secondary characters we see during this time, is Joshua, but he leads them in, right? But as they're starting to go in, there's a story of these spies that go, and we meet another secondary character named Rahab. Rahab's a woman, right? Immediately secondary character in this time period. But she hides these spies in this little town called Jericho. Ever heard of it? Right? And she hides these spies that come in, and why does she do it? Because she's afraid of God. Right? Because she fears God. Because she knows that God is more powerful than anything else that's going on. And she is strong and courageous against the world in order to stand up in that moment. She's given one moment. And because she takes that one moment and she does what she's called to do, now all of a sudden, she and her lineage are super changing up the world. Why? She's the great-great-grandmother of Jesus Christ. Because she's faithful. One lady in a room, living in a wall. Like her house was literally in a wall. She's a secondary character that is greatness thrust upon her, and she takes advantage of it because she is strong and courageous. Then we get a story of another secondary character named Achan. Because they come into Jericho, and because of Rahab and her faithfulness, what happens? They march around, right? Maybe you've seen VeggieTales. And the walls come tumbling down, right? The walls come tumbling down. They come into Jericho. They wipe out Jericho. But God says to them, hey, Jericho's special. It's the first. I like having first things. That's what God likes, right? He likes to take the first things. Jericho's the first conquering, and God says, everything that's there belongs to me. Don't take it. Don't touch it. Burn it all. It's mine, right? And that's God's right. He's God, right? And so they go in, and Joshua's like, we're doing what God says because I'm strong and courageous. So he does it. But Achan, a secondary character, a soldier, just one soldier in an army of many, shows us that when we don't step up, when we don't take advantage and do what God asks us to do, that a secondary character can also change the course of an entire nation. Because Achan decides to take something and hide it. He goes against God's will. He's not strong and courageous. He's selfish and weak. And because of that, when he doesn't take advantage of the moment that God gives him, when they go to Ai right here, which is a central town, the Israelites get smacked hard. And God has to call him out for his sin, ultimately punishing him for that sin. What will one little trinket matter? God doesn't really care, right? Wrong. The little things matter to God. The secondary characters matter to God. He ends up hurting the entire group. One guy, one soldier, one selfish act. Our actions have consequences, especially the ones that we don't own up to. We can be strong and courageous, or we can be selfish and weak in those moments that God calls us to stand in the spotlight. In the spotlight. Joshua, secondary characters steal the show, like Special Agent Number 1, when they step up in the conquest of the Promised Land. Joshua takes the lead, Rahab stands for God, and Achan betrays his faith and his people. All these secondary characters get the spotlight, if even for a moment, while Israel reclaims the land that God has promised them. They march over the land and drive out the majority of the people. They go, and they start wiping people out, right? Because it's God's promised land. And then Joshua dies. He gives up the spotlight. The progress stops. The people forget their greater purpose and just go back to living life every single day. And that's a temptation. It's just to go back to living life like we're unimportant, like we're nothing to God. But the people who think that they're secondary characters are the ones that change nations. We all start from somewhere. These Israelites don't take advantage of the moments that God puts before them. And so my question for you tonight is, what are you doing with your moments that God has given you? Are you strong and courageous? Are you the secondary character that gets to step up when the moment is right and the spotlight is on you? You may think you're a secondary character in the story right now, but Jesus tells us in Luke chapter 12, verse 7, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? And not one of them are more value than many sparrows. See, and not one of them is forgotten by God. Why, even the hairs on your head are all numbered. Fear not. You are not a secondary character. Jesus himself seemed like a secondary character. He was born into poverty, oppression, loss, and he changed everything. What can you do with a moment when God has called you to it? When God gives you those choices to make, are you strong and courageous? Or are you selfish and weak? You have a part to play, but you have to choose who you will serve in those moments. And I'm going to leave you with some of the last words of Joshua, the super soldier, the Steve Rogers turned awesome, the secondary character turned powerhouse. He says this, and I quote, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served before the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Who are you serving today? And what is your part going to be when God calls on you?